Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you that will help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. And this video was originally going to be a video about journaling for recovery, because I'd received a question asking for some advice about how to journal for recovery. And so I decided to get my old journals out and have a look through what I was doing during my eating disorders with my journals. And I decided that instead of making a video telling you how to journal, that I might share some of my recovery story. And I've only really shared my story in snippets before, and little bits here and there. I've been reluctant to because, one, I'm a therapist, and how helpful is it always for a potential client to know that much about their therapist? There's a lot of debate about that. I'm more self-disclosing than most, but this video is probably going to be the most self-disclosing I have ever been. I'm not sure if self-disclosing is a verb, but I'm using it as one anyway. So I actually feel nervous about doing this video in a way that I haven't in the past. I suppose because it is so personal. I think normally when I do videos I think, well, it's going to resonate with some people and it's not going to resonate with others, and that's okay. Whereas this is a little bit more of like laying things out bare. I just wanted to insert a trigger warning here that I do talk about references to purging, but no graphic descriptions. I mention weight gain, but no numbers are used. And I do reference that talking about not wanting to live. It's not as far as suicidal ideation, but just want to give you a heads up at this point in the video if any of these things might be triggering for you. This video might not be one for you at this time. So I struggled with bulimia for about 5 or 6 years, and then binge eating for another 5 years after that. And my use of journaling was it was very sporadic. So I don't have a really clear picture from my journals. They're more like little chunks here and there. And I would normally journal if, one, I was feeling utterly desperate and I didn't know what to do with myself, I might journal. So those ones are pretty hard reading for me. And also if I was feeling really motivated on some new program or something that I was going to try for recovery, I would start journaling because I would want to try and use it as a kind of accountability tool. And one of the reasons I think for sharing it now was I was thinking when I looked at my journals today that if I'd still been in my eating disorder during this time of self-isolation, I can't imagine what that would have done to my mental health. And the thought of it I found quite scary, and it made me think that there are people, maybe you're one of them, out there feeling very isolated and stuck in their eating disorders. So I thought maybe if I shared a bit of what was going on for me, that it might make people feel a bit less alone in this. So that was my motivations really for sharing some of this stuff with you. So I've got here, I have a journal from 2008, and I will read you an excerpt that I wrote on Friday the 26th of September 2008. I wrote, "I feel sick. It's been over 5 hours since I binged, and I still feel like there's food as high as my windpipe. Weighed myself at the gym," and then I insert my weight, which I won't share because I don't think that's helpful. "Heaviest weight I've ever seen on the scales. Hate food. Hate what it's done to me. Disgusted with myself for getting to this point. Want to fast for 7 days till Keely's birthday. Knees hurt from carrying the extra weight. Feel tearful but determined. Right now, I never want to eat again. I can't control it and it makes me miserable. Got to stop talking about it to people. I'll get a reputation for being a whinger. Hate being so weak. my behaviour is so compulsive. It owns me and it is destroying me. I think it's really interesting that I talk about my behaviour as it, because that, I think, is how it can feel when behaviour is compulsive. It feels like your behaviour isn't you, because it doesn't feel like you have any control over it. Your behaviour is controlling you. So the next excerpt was like a couple of weeks later, on Sunday the 5th of October, and I kind of, I don't know if it made me smile is quite the right word, but it made me, maybe even it made me ache a little bit, because the first thing I wrote was, I think I've hit rock bottom. And I know from where this was that things were going to get so much worse. So I'm glad I didn't know it at the time. So I wrote, I think I've hit rock bottom. I do not understand why. I cannot control this. Just had a bath, sat sobbing in it, naked and ashamed and so very, very alone. No one can understand. Even I can't understand. Major binge today during and after cinema. Then I go on to describe purging, because this was in my purging days, and I'm not going to read the purging bit because I think it's triggering and not helpful, but I think it's just suffice to say I was purging. Then I put, so utterly pathetic. I just want to be normal. This is not normal behaviour. I just do not know what to do. I don't want to live. I wish I could fall asleep and never wake up again. So that's hard to read, like from where I am now, and I can remember it well. I can remember feeling so much in despair that I didn't want to live. I was never actively suicidal. I was never thinking about doing anything to myself in that way. But I can remember often thinking that, you know what, if it's my time to go, I'm ready. Because I couldn't see a way out. Like in those moments, it's really hard to see a way out. But I did find a way out. And I suppose that's the bit as well, the message of hope that I want to share with people today. And then I've got this journal, this very pretty one, which I've called it Fast Journal. Because it was, I think I always thought, for me, the way I always tried to handle my binging was by telling myself to fast, because there's so much stuff out there about fasting being physically beneficial for us. So it sounded like a really sensible thing to do when I was binging. But actually the psychological impact of fasting, I think, for somebody with a binging disorder kind of outweighs it. And I think health and well-being always starts with the mind. So it's not that I'm anti-fasting, but I think that for most people that struggle with binge eating, it's not helpful, at least until after you've healed your relationship with food, because the motivation behind our behaviour is really important. And what was really the motivation behind my fasting? Probably not a good one. So I'm not going to read much from this one because I don't want to read about my attempts at fasting, but I do want to read this bit because I think this bit might help those of you who, after binging, are telling yourself, I just shouldn't eat anything for a while. I wrote, the backlash after this fast was so horrific that I haven't fasted since, but I am so tired and I have eaten and eaten for the past month and I just can't bear it anymore. I'm exhausted from fighting the urge to eat all the time, capitalized, all the time. I don't understand and I don't know what to do anymore. I feel broken and lost and I don't recognize myself. I just want my life back. It really doesn't seem so much to ask. That, I think, was a big thing for me for a long time. And I did a post on this, I think, a little while back on Instagram. But where I think I stayed stuck, and a lot of people stay stuck, is they want to try and get back to how they were before the eating disorder. But eating disorders change us. They change our brains, they change our bodies, they change our emotions around food. So I'm not sure, maybe for some people, I hate to make generalizations for everyone, but I think for a lot of people, like, going back isn't an option. We have to, or I had to, push forward out the other side. And go through it and rebuild something on the other side, which does look different to how things were before my eating disorders. It was kind of inevitable. So this journal cracks me up. So this is a journal. It's supposed to be like a lifetime journal, and I got this in 2012, and my intention was to document my entire life in it. Suffice to say, I think I kept it for about 6 months. So just the first tiny bit of this has got some writing in, which I had a look through earlier. So yeah, I think a big thing that certainly was a big part of my personality, and I think I see it in a lot of people that struggle with binge eating, is that there seems to be this tendency to have an idea about this big project and then not stick to it. So there's a sense of making big plans and not sticking to it, and that gets played out in food, and I think for a lot of people it gets played out in other areas of our lives too. And I think part of how I changed and who I became through going through binge eating disorder and bulimia was I've become someone who now is much better at sticking to stuff that I say I'm going to do. And when I don't, I can really look at like what are the reasons for it. So rather than this big excitement that this major project or thing that I'm going to start is going to be life-changing, I'm just much more realistic with myself, and maybe that's to do with self-expectations not being as high. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I think I see that a lot with people. So I'll read you an excerpt from Tuesday the 27th of August 2013. I wrote, "The summer seems to have gone, and I feel like I never really noticed it. It has been swallowed up by obsessive food thoughts and numbing out. The food takes up so much headspace. I hate it and I feel miserable. But yet, if it were all taken away tomorrow, what would be left? I don't know who I am anymore, and more frustratingly, I find it hard to picture who I'm trying to be. Sometimes I get glimpses of her, but then I lose her and the obsessive addictive thoughts take over." Yeah, I think, and I ask this question a lot to people. If you weren't thinking about food all the time, what would you be thinking about? And it's one of the reasons why I talk about recovery as a creative process. It's not about completely changing and being a different person on the other side of it, but it is about building a picture of you who's not somebody who's struggling and thinking about food all the time. And if you were to, I don't know, if in your mind you think the struggle with food is about losing weight, that idea that if you get to your ideal weight, what are you going to think about? If you've been obsessing about food to lose weight, when you lose weight, you're going to be left with like this brain space that what are you going to do with your energy? Which is why I think a lot of people lose weight and they're still obsessed with food. That and because restrictions around. I feel like I've tried so many things and they usually work for a while until I fall back again. So I feel like it's just me failing again. I see that all the time with everyone. That sense that because like you want to get on top of this so much, and because you're not managing to, the conclusion is often, well, it's me, I'm failing again and again. And that idea that I think we look for this way out, and then we get excited about a new idea or a new way of eating, and we think that that's going to be the thing that makes it better, makes us better. And when it doesn't work for us, that could be a diet, it could be anything, it could be therapy even. And when it doesn't seem to work for us, we blame ourselves and we think we failed, and it's just heartbreaking. I keep searching. I have to. I would fall into a very deep, dark place if I gave up. It just seems laughable, almost ridiculous. I can't feed myself. One of the most basic human functions, and I don't know how to do it. Nothing feels right. I wish I didn't have to eat. I wish I didn't think this way. I wish I knew what to do. Yeah. That's hard to read because I felt that. I just thought, like, what a problem to have. I used to be like, couldn't I have had, there's this idea that everybody has some issue that they're working on, and we all have our challenges. And I can remember thinking, like, why does this have to be mine? Like, it just seems, yeah, it was just not the one that I wanted, but we don't get the challenges that we want. That's why they're challenges, right? So jumping to the 25th of February 2014, I wrote, "I feel so confused and sad and terribly lonely. I just want to be healthy. I cannot fathom where the physical symptoms end and the psychological ones begin." I was having some hormonal health issues at the time, and that can have a huge impact on eating and body composition, so it was really hard for me to know what was in my control and what was my biology. I don't know what I can change and what I need to learn to accept. Yes, I think that is a life challenge, isn't it? What is it we can change, and what are the things that we need to learn to accept? I think that's a moving goalpost all the time, and a question that is worth, I think, sitting with regularly, asking ourselves that regularly. I don't know what I'm supposed to do to feel better. This is so painful. I'm so fed up of struggling. I'm going to skip that bit because I think it might be a bit triggering. I have enough sense to know that these feelings will pass, and that I will probably read this in the future and feel quite horrified. I thought it was really interesting because actually when I read this in the future, and I read this entry probably about 2 years ago, I reread it, and when I saw that, I thought, actually no, I wasn't horrified. I was kind of, because you can come out on the other side of it and think, well, it wasn't that bad. It's really hard to remember when you're feeling better just how bad you felt at the time. And I'd always thought that what I'd gone through had been really horrible, really painful, but I was wondering whether I was kind of like exaggerating with hindsight, like how reliable was my memory about how horrible I felt at this time. So when I read that, I actually felt in some ways validated that, yeah, it was horrible. I am at my wit's end. I don't want to keep living like this. Something needs to change. I have waited for 5 years for something to change, and it hasn't. I have expected something to happen that will make all this better, but perhaps I am supposed to get off my arse and do something about it. But how and what? I cannot make sense of it. I think there's a huge amount of confusion around binge eating. Like, what is it that we need to do to kind of come out of this? And I think sort of some of the biggest realizations for me was that, one, focusing on weight loss made it worse. And there's another thing in there about managing thoughts to some degree and not necessarily believing everything that you think. Because quite often, like, I have a thought about something and we think that the reason we're having that thought is because we've realized something true, as opposed to we have just made meaning about something. So if you were to look in the mirror and go, oh my goodness, my body is too big, you think you're just seeing something that's true, as opposed to you are making a judgment call, you're forming an opinion, and other days you might not feel as big. So it's really kind of that idea of not necessarily trusting your thoughts, which can be scary, but it can also be quite liberating. And so I did want to share a couple of bits from much more recent, like much more towards the end of recovery. And I think there was for me a couple of years of being kind of semi-recovered, where I would have bouts of binging and I would have bouts of feeling okay. And so I wrote, I already feel a sense of dread and inevitability. It's like I've always felt like this, and I always will. It's clear to me my eating isn't going to go well today. Now this is something that I see coming up a lot, that idea that knowing in advance that your eating is going to be bad. By bad, I mean that you're going to binge today. And that feeling of inevitability, combined with the belief, that's what makes it inevitable. the thing is, it's not inevitable. So even when it have that feeling where it feels like it's inevitable and you're believing it's inevitable, if part of you, that kind of meta perspective part, can go, is this really true? We think it is because the past, over and over again, when we felt like this and we thought like this, it's led to binging. And I think this is something that needs to be broken to some degree. I'm not out of my bad phase, and I often saw it as I would go through bad phases and good phases, and then the good phases got a bit longer, and the bad phases got smaller. But what made me possibly think I could be? The bad phase leaves me. I don't leave the bad phase. God or whatever hasn't granted me my reprieve yet. This, I think, was my experience for a long time. It felt like binge eating descended on me, and then it would leave me for a bit. It would come and it would go, and it didn't feel like I had any way of even seeing how it happened. It almost seemed to catch me. If I was feeling like quite comfortable with food for a while, it would kind of catch me off guard. And that, I think, is, again, something that is experienced by a lot of people. And actually, it got to a point, I think another real turning point for me was that knowing that if I was feeling wobbly with food, my way out of it was intense presence. So if I'd known that I'd had a bad day of binging and going to bed, what I'd previously do is be like, right, tomorrow I have to try harder not to let that happen. And that would tend to lead me a bit more towards restriction, or at the very least sort of food obsession. And instead I got to the point where if I started feeling wobbly with food, I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to be really present with what I'm feeling. Because when I pay attention to what I'm feeling and I allow it, the urges to binge just were not that strong. It would just be a thought. And because I was doing the thought work about not believing the thoughts, it wouldn't have the power to take me over. And so this, I'll just read one last bit, I think. And again, this is kind of towards the end of my binge eating days. So today has been a day of seeking escape. I'm just so damn uncomfortable. I'm clawing for every possible distraction: food, audiobooks, podcasts, phone games. It's like I'm afraid of just being. I want to be comfortable in my own mind and body. I want calmness, peace, clarity, and connectedness. I'm feeling fearful of self-delusionment, of thinking I'm something that I'm not. I want to see the truth of things, even if it breaks me apart. This, I think, was when I was getting to the point where, and like I put in here, what I really want is calmness, peace, clarity, and connectedness. And when I wanted that more than weight loss, binge eating would subside. And that idea of wanting to be comfortable in mind and body, I think most people would say that that's what they want, but we get caught in this spiral when we think that in order to achieve that, we have to change something external, something concrete in our lives or our bodies. If we change the outside, then we'll change the way we feel. But I think that recovery from binge eating it's inner work. It's a call to go on an inner journey, because actually I don't think it's anything out there that's going to get rid of the binge eating for you. I think it's the same things kind of again and again. It's that willingness to be present with yourself and the willingness to experience your feelings. And feelings are often, we make feelings worse by what we tell ourselves about our feelings. You know, we judge ourselves for how we feel, and that's going on so much at the moment. I've got clients who are very apologetic for feeling bad or feeling like they're complaining about their situation in isolation, because they know that other people seem to, by whatever measure we're using, have it worse. But when we just allow what we feel, if I ever feel wobbly with my food, if I come back to I'm going to allow myself to feel what I feel and make a commitment not to escape, that's the bit that recenters me and keeps me recovered from binge eating. So that is a glimpse into me and my story and my journey. I hope, if nothing else, this might have made you feel less alone. Maybe you resonated with some of the stuff that I wrote. Maybe you've been thinking some of the same things. But the idea being there is hope, and that nothing outside of you has to change in order for you to find freedom. So, my friends, goodbye. See you on the next video.